You're dead to me, Mom. Those 5 words exploded through my phone on the evening of my 65th birthday, spoken by the only daughter I'd ever had, Danielle. Hello, my name is Joanne Thompson, and if you want to hear how a mother's love became a lesson in survival, stay with me. I'm writing this from a small lakeside cottage in Pine Hollow, but this story begins in a very different place. If you're watching this video, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. Now let's get to the story. 6 words that shattered my 65th birthday, and ultimately rebuilt my entire life. It was a crisp Tuesday morning in late September, and I woke up before dawn with the kind of joy I hadn't felt in years. After all, turning 65 felt like a milestone, a bridge between the life I'd lived and the freedom I'd finally earned after decades of sacrifice. I spent the morning baking cinnamon rolls from scratch, the same recipe I used when Danielle was 7 years old and would wake up on Saturday mornings asking if the magic smell was ready yet. I set the good china on the dining room table, the white porcelain set with the tiny blue flowers that my late husband William and I received as a wedding gift 40 years ago. I polished the silver, arranged a vase of fresh-cut lilacs by the window, and placed a single card next to my plate. Inside the card, I had written, "To my Danielle, thank you for making motherhood the greatest gift of my life." I told myself she'd call early. She always used to. But the hours crawled by. Morning became noon. Noon became afternoon. The cinnamon rolls cooled. The lilacs began to droop slightly in the warm kitchen light. I checked my phone every 20 minutes, refreshing the screen as if that would somehow summon her name to appear. What I didn't imagine was that when my phone finally rang at dusk, the voice on the other end wouldn't be singing happy birthday. It would be delivering a death sentence. When I saw Danielle's name flash across the screen at 6:47 p.m., my heart leapt. I answered on the first ring. "Danielle. Sweetheart, I've been waiting all." "Mom." Her voice cut through mine like a blade through paper. Cold. Clipped. There was no warmth in it, no recognition of the day, no acknowledgement of the life we'd shared. Just that one word, "Mom," said like a complaint. I felt my smile falter. "Honey, is everything okay?" "No, Mom, everything is not okay," she snapped. "Troy and I have been talking, and we can't do this anymore. You're not safe living alone in that house. You need proper care, and we can't keep pretending you don't." My hand froze halfway to my chest. The words weren't making sense. "Danielle, what are you? We're moving you into St. Mary's home tomorrow," she continued, her tone flat and rehearsed, as though she'd practiced this speech. "It's already arranged. The room is ready. Troy will come by in the morning to help you pack." The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. A nursing home? "Danielle, it's my birthday. Why would you?" "This isn't about your birthday, Mom." Her voice rose, sharp and defensive. "This is about reality. You can't keep living in denial. I've made my decision, and if you keep fighting me on this, then I'm done. You're dead to me if you keep acting like this." Silence. Not the kind of silence that invites explanation. The kind that follows a door slamming shut. And then, the line went dead. I stood there in my kitchen, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone as the cinnamon rolls sat untouched and the lilacs swayed gently in the breeze from the open window. The card I'd written for Danielle lay beside my empty plate, the words inside suddenly feeling like a letter to a ghost. That hang-up was the moment everything I thought I knew about motherhood, about unconditional love, about sacrifice, about the bond between a mother and daughter, cracked clean in two. But what Danielle didn't know, as she delivered that cold verdict on my 65th birthday, was that 2 weeks earlier I had received a letter from a lawyer in Denver. A letter that would change everything. And in the silence of that autumn evening, standing alone in the home I'd built with my own hands, I made a quiet promise to myself. "You think I'm powerless, Danielle. But you're about to learn exactly who your mother is." The movers arrived at 8 a.m. sharp. I knew they were coming. Troy had sent a terse text message the night before, "Movers at 8. Please have essentials ready." As if I were checking out of a hotel rather than being evicted from 40 years of memories. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in William's old reading chair by the window, watching the street lamp flicker against the darkness, wondering how a single phone call could dismantle an entire life in less than 24 hours. When the truck pulled up, I watched from behind the curtain as 3 men in blue uniforms began unloading boxes and packing tape. My heart hammered against my ribs. Part of me still believed Danielle would appear at the last moment, tears in her eyes, saying it had all been a terrible misunderstanding. But the person who climbed out of the silver sedan behind the moving truck wasn't Danielle. It was Troy. He stood on the sidewalk for a long moment, hands shoved deep in his pockets, staring at the house as though it were a crime scene he'd rather not enter. When he finally walked up the front steps, he couldn't meet my eyes. "Morning, Joanne," he mumbled, his voice barely audible. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to demand where my daughter was, why she couldn't face me herself, why this man, this stranger who'd married into my family only 6 years ago, was the one standing in my doorway while my own flesh and blood hid like a coward. But I didn't say any of that. Instead, I asked quietly, "Where's Danielle?" Troy shifted his weight, looking everywhere except at me. She had a work thing. She thought it would be easier this way. Easier, I repeated, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. Easier for whom? He didn't answer. The movers pushed past us, their heavy boots echoing through the hallway. One of them, a young man with a shaved head and kind eyes, nodded respectfully as he passed. "We'll take good care of your things, ma'am," he said. I nodded, unable to speak. For the next 3 hours, I watched strangers dismantle my life. They wrapped William's photographs in bubble wrap, our wedding portrait, the photo of him holding newborn Danielle in the hospital, the picture of us standing in front of this very house the day we bought it for $87,000 in 1985. Back then, this neighborhood was modest, working class, full of young families like ours trying to build something from nothing. William and I had painted every room ourselves. We'd installed the kitchen cabinets together, me holding the level while he drilled. We'd planted the garden, laid the stone pathway, built the back deck where Danielle took her first steps. Every corner of this house held a memory. Every floorboard creaked with history. And now it was being packed into cardboard boxes by men who didn't know that the chipped blue vase on the mantel was from our honeymoon in Maine, or that the oak dining table had hosted 18 Thanksgivings, or that the bedroom upstairs still smelled faintly of William's aftershave even though he'd been gone for 7 years. "Ma'am, what do you want us to do with these?" One of the movers held up a box of Danielle's childhood drawings, crayon masterpieces she'd made in elementary school that I'd saved in the attic. "Leave them," Troy said before I could answer. I turned to him sharply. "Excuse me?" "We don't have room for storage," he said, still not looking at me. "Just, leave anything that's not essential." "Not essential?" My voice cracked. "Those are her drawings. Her childhood. Joanne, please." Troy finally met my eyes, and what I saw there startled me. It wasn't cruelty. It was a shame. Deep, suffocating shame. "This is hard enough." "Hard for you?" The words came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't care anymore. "You're not the one being thrown out of your home, Troy." He flinched. For a moment, I thought he might actually say something honest, something real. But instead, he turned away and muttered, "It's for your own good, Joanne. You'll see." Those words, "for your own good," felt like a slap. Because I knew they were a lie. This wasn't about my safety or my well-being. This was about the house. This property had appreciated to nearly $500,000 over 4 decades. This asset that Danielle and Troy had clearly decided belonged to them. By noon, the house was empty. The movers loaded the last box into the truck, and Troy handed me a small overnight bag. "I packed some clothes and toiletries for you," he said quietly. "The rest will go into storage." "Storage," I repeated numbly. "Just until we figure things out." I looked at him, really looked at him, and I realized something. Troy wasn't a villain. He was a coward. A weak man who'd let my daughter turn into someone I no longer recognized, and who lacked the spine to stop her. "Let's go," he said gently, gesturing toward his car. I took one last look at the house. The windows reflected the afternoon sun, making the glass look like mirrors. I could almost see William standing in the doorway, waving goodbye the way he used to every morning before work. "I'm sorry," I thought. "I'm sorry I couldn't protect what we built." Then I turned away and got into Troy's car. St. Mary's home sat on the edge of town, a low brick building surrounded by neatly trimmed hedges and a parking lot full of sedans. It looked pleasant enough from the outside, almost cheerful, with its flower boxes and painted shutters. But the moment Troy opened the front door, I was hit with the smell. Disinfectant mixed with something vaguely medicinal, undercut by the faint odor of overcooked vegetables and old carpet. It was the smell of institutions, of places where people went to wait. A woman in pale blue scrubs greeted us at the front desk. She was young, maybe 30, with blonde hair pulled back in a tight ponytail and a smile that was friendly but detached. "You must be Mrs. Thompson. Welcome to St. Mary's. I'm Rachel, the intake coordinator." She spoke in that bright, overly cheerful tone people use with children and the elderly, like I was a confused toddler rather than a woman who'd raised a family, run a household, and buried a husband. "Let me show you to your room," Rachel continued, already walking down the hall without waiting for a response. Troy and I followed her through a maze of sterile corridors. We passed a common room where several residents sat in wheelchairs, staring blankly at a television playing a game show. One woman looked up as I passed, her eyes empty and distant. My chest tightened. This is where I'll disappear, I thought. This is where I'll become invisible. Rachel stopped in front of a door marked 14B and pushed it open with a flourish. "Here we are. You'll be sharing with Mrs. Patterson, but she's very quiet. Meals are at 7 a.m., noon, and 5 p.m. Activities are posted on the board in the common room. If you need anything, just press the call button." The room was small. 2 narrow beds, 2 dressers, 2 nightstands. The walls were beige. The curtains were beige. Everything was beige and safe and soul-crushingly impersonal. Troy set my overnight bag on the bed. "I'll bring the rest of your things next week," he said quietly. I didn't respond. Rachel chatted cheerfully about the facility's amenities, the courtyard, the library, the weekly movie nights, but her words blurred into background noise. All I could think was, how did I get here? How did my life shrink to a beige room with a call button? After Rachel left, Troy lingered awkwardly by the door. "Joanne, I know you're upset, but..." "Go," I said, my voice flat. "I just want you to know that we're doing this because we care." "Go, Troy." He hesitated, then nodded and left. And for the first time in my life, I was truly alone. That night, I couldn't sleep. My roommate, Mrs. Patterson, snored softly in the bed across from mine. Outside, I could hear the muffled sounds of the night staff making their rounds, footsteps in the hallway, the squeak of a medication cart, low voices discussing someone's blood pressure. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling, and tried to make sense of everything that had happened in the last 36 hours. Just 2 days ago, I was living in my own home, planning my birthday, believing my daughter loved me. Now I was here. Institutionalized. Put away like an old piece of furniture that no longer fit the decor. Around 11 p.m., I heard voices outside my door. 2 nurses, women I didn't recognize, were talking in hushed tones just beyond the threshold. "Did you see the new admission in 14B? One of them said. "The Thompson woman?" "Yeah. Her daughter already called twice today to confirm everything was set up. I heard she listed the mother's house for sale before she even moved her in." My blood turned to ice. "Already?" The second nurse sounded shocked. "That's cold. The woman's been here less than a day. Apparently it went online this morning. Prime location, downtown. Probably worth a fortune. God, some people." Their voices faded as they walked away, but I lay frozen in the darkness, their words echoing in my skull. Listed for sale. This morning. Before I even arrived. The betrayal crashed over me like a wave, stealing my breath. This wasn't about my safety. This wasn't about concern or love or doing what was best for me. This was a transaction. Danielle had calculated the exact moment to move me out so she could cash in on the house. She'd probably had the realtor lined up for weeks, the paperwork ready, the plan executed with surgical precision. She hadn't just abandoned me. She'd sold me. Tears burned hot trails down my temples, soaking into the stiff pillowcase. I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from sobbing out loud, but my whole body shook with the force of it. How could you? I thought. How could you do this to me? But then, slowly, another thought began to surface. A memory from 2 weeks ago. The letter. Flashback. It had arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in a cream-colored envelope with a Denver return address. I almost threw it away, thinking it was junk mail, but something made me open it. Dear Mrs. Thompson. I am writing on behalf of the estate of Harold William Thompson, deceased. As his sole surviving sibling and designated heir, you are entitled to the full distribution of his assets. I'd read the letter 3 times before the words finally sank in. Harold. My quiet, reclusive older brother who'd worked in oil investments for 40 years and never married, never had children, never seemed to care much about money despite making quite a lot of it. Harold, who'd passed away suddenly from a heart attack 6 months ago, leaving everything to me. The lawyer, Mr. Bennett, had listed the assets in neat columns, properties in Colorado and Texas, stock portfolios, investment accounts, and liquid assets totaling $9.4 million. $9.4 million. I'd sat at my kitchen table, staring at that number until my vision blurred. I hadn't told anyone. Not even Danielle. Part of me wanted to call her and share the news, maybe even help her and Troy with their finances. But something held me back. Some instinct I couldn't quite name. Maybe it was the way Danielle had been talking about my house lately. Little comments about how much it must be worth now, how I didn't really need all that space, how it would be smarter to downsize. Or maybe it was the way Troy had started asking questions about my will, my insurance policies, my bank accounts. Whatever the reason, I'd kept Harold's inheritance a secret. I'd folded the letter carefully and tucked it into the back of my recipe box, behind the card for my mother's pound cake. And now, lying in this narrow bed in this sterile room, I understood why. End flashback. I reached for my purse on the nightstand and pulled out my phone. The screen's glow illuminated the dark room. My fingers trembled as I scrolled through my contacts and found Mr. Bennett's number. He'd included his personal cell phone in the letter, with a note, "Please don't hesitate to call if you have any questions." I typed out a text message. Mr. Bennett, this is Joanne Thompson, Harold's sister. I need your help. Can we speak tomorrow? It's urgent. I hit send and set the phone down. Then I lay back and stared at the ceiling, feeling something shift deep inside me. Grief. Yes. Heartbreak. Absolutely. But underneath all that pain, something else was stirring. Resolve. I thought of Danielle sitting in my house, her house now, apparently, probably already measuring the rooms for staging, picking out paint colors for the realtor's photos. I thought of her calculating the sale price, planning how she'd spend the money, maybe even laughing with Troy about how easy it had been. And I whispered into the darkness. Danielle thinks she buried me in comfort. But she just planted the seeds of her own lesson. Outside, a car passed by, its headlights briefly sweeping across the beige walls. And for the first time since that terrible birthday phone call, I smiled. I didn't sleep that night. Or the next. For 2 days, I lay in that narrow bed at St. Mary's, listening to Mrs. Patterson's rhythmic snoring and the shuffle of nurses in the hallway, while my mind worked through possibilities like a chess player considering every move. The old Joanne, the one who'd raised Danielle, who'd smoothed over conflicts and swallowed hurts for the sake of family peace, whispered that I should forgive. That daughters make mistakes. That blood is thicker than betrayal. But that voice was growing quieter. Because every time I closed my eyes, I saw Danielle's house listing. I imagined her scrolling through real estate websites before I'd even unpacked my overnight bag. I pictured her in Troy toasting champagne while I ate institutional meatloaf from a divided plastic tray. And something inside me, something I'd buried under decades of being a good mother, a good wife, a good woman, finally broke free. On Wednesday morning, Mr. Bennett called. Mrs. Thompson, his voice was warm and professional, with a slight Colorado drawl. I got your text. Are you all right? I glanced at Mrs. Patterson, who was still asleep, then stepped into the hallway. The morning staff was busy with breakfast service, giving me a moment of privacy. I need your help, I said quietly. And I need you to move quickly. Tell me what's happened. So I did. I told him about the birthday call, about being moved to St. Mary's against my will, about overhearing the nurses discuss my house being listed for sale. My voice remained steady, clinical even, as though I were describing events that had happened to someone else. When I finished, there was a long pause. Mrs. Thompson, Mr. Bennett said carefully, do you currently have legal representation regarding your daughter's power of attorney? No. Then as your attorney handling Harold's estate, I'd like to offer you additional counsel. What your daughter has done may constitute elder abuse and financial exploitation. The words hit me like cold water. I don't want to prosecute her, I said quickly. She's my daughter. I understand. But you do need to protect yourself. He paused. With your permission, I can take immediate action to revoke her power of attorney and freeze any joint accounts or cards she has access to. We can do this quietly, without any criminal proceedings. My hand tightened around the phone. How quickly? I can have the paperwork filed by noon today. Mountain time, he added. By this evening, her access will be terminated. I thought about Danielle sitting in her pristine kitchen, sipping her morning coffee, probably already planning how to spend the house sale proceeds. Do it, I said. There's one more thing, Mr. Bennett continued. You mentioned you're currently in an assisted living facility. Are you there voluntarily? Technically, yes. But you were coerced. Yes. Mrs. Thompson, with Harold's inheritance, you have options. You could hire private care if you need it. You could purchase your own residence. You have financial freedom now, if you choose to use it. Financial freedom. The word seemed impossible. For 65 years, I'd lived within tight budgets, first with my parents, then with William, then on my widow's pension and Social Security. I'd clipped coupons, waited for sales, carefully measured every expense. And now, suddenly, I had more money than I'd ever imagined. What would you suggest? I asked. That depends on what you want, Mr. Bennett said gently. What do you want, Mrs. Thompson? The question hung in the air. What did I want? Not revenge, exactly. Not cruelty. But justice. Yes. And independence. And maybe, after all these years of shrinking myself to fit other people's expectations, I wanted to finally take up space. I want a home, I said slowly. Something small, manageable. Somewhere quiet where I can think. I can help with that. I have a colleague in your area who specializes in estate sales and property acquisition. With your permission, I'll have her contact you today. Thank you, Mr. Bennett. One last thing, he said. Once I file these documents, your daughter will be notified. She'll likely try to contact you. You don't owe her an explanation, but you should be prepared. After we hung up, I stood in the hallway for a long moment, phone still clutched in my hand. A nurse passed by, pushing a medication cart. You okay, Mrs. Thompson? I smiled, a real smile, the first genuine one I'd felt in days. Yes. I think I'm going to be. That afternoon, I met with Mr. Bennett's colleague, Patricia Chin, via video call on one of St. Mary's public computers in the small library. Patricia was in her 40s, sharp and efficient, with kind eyes behind black-rimmed glasses. "Mr. Bennett explained your situation," she said. "I've already pulled some listings in your area that might interest you. Small properties, low maintenance, good neighborhoods." She shared her screen, showing me a series of homes. The third one made me stop. It was a cottage, a real cottage, not just a small house, sitting on the edge of Mirror Lake, about 20 miles outside town. White clapboard siding, blue shutters, a small dock extending into the water. The interior photos showed hardwood floors, large windows letting in natural light, and a kitchen just big enough for one person to move comfortably. "That one," I said, before I could second-guess myself. Patricia smiled. "It's been on the market for 3 weeks. The price is reasonable, well within your budget. I can schedule a viewing for tomorrow if you'd like." "I'll take it." She blinked. "Don't you want to see it first?" "No," I said firmly. "I trust my instinct. Make an offer today. Full asking price, cash, close as soon as possible." Patricia's smile widened. "I like your style, Mrs. Thompson." After the call ended, I sat alone in the library, staring at the photograph of the cottage on the screen. This would be mine. Not William's house with William's memories. Not Danielle's investment property. Not a beige room in an institution. Mine. For the first time in my life, I would own something that belonged to no one but myself. The next morning, my phone rang at 7:45 a.m. Danielle. I stared at her name on the screen, my heart hammering. Part of me, that old, deeply ingrained part, wanted to answer, to soothe whatever crisis she was experiencing, to smooth things over. But I didn't. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. She called again at 8:03. And again at 8:17. By 9 a.m., I had 6 missed calls and 3 voicemails. I didn't listen to them. At 9:32, she called again. This time, I answered. "Mom." Her voice was frantic, higher pitched than usual. "Mom, oh my God, finally. I've been trying to reach you all morning." "I know," I said calmly. "I was busy." "Mom, something's wrong with my credit cards. All of them are declined. I called the bank and they said my access to your accounts has been revoked. They said you filed legal documents. What's going on?" I took a slow breath, watching the morning light filter through the beige curtains of my room. "You told me I needed help, Danielle," I said, my voice steady and cool. "So I helped myself." Silence. "Then, what does that mean?" "It means I spoke to a lawyer. A very good lawyer. He's revoked your power of attorney and terminated your access to any accounts or assets in my name. You can't do that." Her voice cracked with panic. "Mom, those were joint accounts. We set those up together so I could help you manage." "Manage my money?" I finished. "Or manage to sell my house the same day you moved me into a nursing home?" Another silence, longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice had changed, defensive, angry. "Someone told you." "I overheard the nurses," I said. "You listed the house before I even unpacked my bag, Danielle. You put me away like furniture you didn't want anymore so you could cash in." "That's not, Mom, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly." My voice remained calm, almost clinical. "You saw an opportunity. A valuable property, an aging mother, and a legal document that gave you control. You took it. We needed that money." Danielle's facade finally cracked completely. "Do you have any idea how expensive private school is? Or what Troy's business losses have been? We were drowning, Mom. That house was just sitting there, appreciating, while you lived in it alone. So you decided it was yours. It was going to be mine eventually anyway," she snapped. "I'm your only child." I was just accelerating the timeline. The words hung between us like poison. I closed my eyes, feeling something inside me finally break, not with pain, but with clarity. "Goodbye, Danielle," I said quietly. "Mom, wait. You'll receive formal notice from my attorney about the change in power of attorney. If you have any questions, direct them to him. Mom, please, we can talk about this." We just did. I hung up. My hands were shaking, but not with fear or uncertainty. With relief. The phone rang again immediately. I turned it off. That afternoon, I stood at the window of my room at St. Mary's, looking out at the parking lot and the street beyond. The autumn sun filtered through clouds, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. A few leaves still clung to the maple tree by the entrance, holding on despite the wind. Martha, the nurse I'd met on my first day, knocked softly and entered. "Everything okay, Mrs. Thompson? I heard you had some phone calls this morning." "I'm fine," I said, and meant it. She studied me for a moment, then smiled. "You look different." "Different how?" "Lighter," she said simply. "Like you're finally breathing." She was right. For 65 years, I'd held my breath. I'd made myself smaller, quieter, more convenient. I believed that being a good mother meant accepting anything my child did, forgiving any hurt, enduring any betrayal. But mothers are people too. And people deserve peace. "Martha," I said, turning from the window. "I'll be checking out of St. Mary's soon. I've purchased a home." Her eyebrows rose. "Really?" "A cottage on Mirror Lake. Small, manageable. Mine." Martha's smile widened. "Good for you, Mrs. Thompson." After she left, I pulled out the photograph Patricia had sent me of the cottage. I studied every detail, the white shutters, the small dock, the large windows that would let in morning light. This wasn't vengeance. This was survival. This was choosing myself after a lifetime of choosing everyone else. I thought about Danielle, probably sitting in her immaculate house right now, panicking about her declined credit cards, calling Troy, trying to figure out how to undo what she'd done. Part of me, that old, maternal part, ached for her distress. But a stronger part recognized that some lessons could only be learned through consequences. I had given Danielle everything, my time, my energy, my unconditional love. I had supported her dreams, celebrated her successes, forgiven her mistakes. But I had forgotten to save anything for myself. The sun broke through the clouds, flooding the room with warm light. I picked up my phone and turned it back on. There were 12 new voicemails and 18 text messages, all from Danielle. I deleted them without reading or listening. Then I opened my notes app and typed. I had spent 65 years earning everyone's approval, being the good daughter, the supportive wife, the selfless mother. I had shaped myself around other people's needs until I forgot I had a shape of my own. Maybe it was time to earn my own approval. Maybe it was time to find out who Joanne Thompson actually was, when nobody was watching. I saved the note and set the phone down. Outside, the autumn wind scattered the last leaves from the maple tree, sending them dancing across the parking lot toward freedom. And I understood, finally, that I was dancing too. They came on a Thursday afternoon. I was in the common room with Martha, half watching a cooking show while she helped me fill out the final paperwork for my cottage closing, when I heard the commotion at the front desk. "I don't care about your visiting hours. That's my mother in there." Danielle's voice cut through the quiet hum of the television and soft conversations like a knife. Martha and I exchanged glances. "You want me to stay?" she asked quietly. I considered it, then shook my head. "No. This needs to happen." She squeezed my shoulder and left just as Danielle burst through the double doors into the common room, Troy trailing behind her like a reluctant shadow. My daughter looked terrible. Her usual polished appearance had crumbled. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, her designer blouse wrinkled, her eyes red-rimmed and wild. She spotted me immediately and strode across the room, her heels clicking sharply against the linoleum. Every resident in the room turned to watch. Mrs. Patterson paused mid-knit. Mr. Chen looked up from his newspaper. Even the television seemed to quiet, waiting. Mom. Danielle stopped in front of my chair, breathing hard. We need to talk. Now. I set down my pen and met her eyes calmly. Hello, Danielle. Troy. Troy stood a few feet back, hands shoved in his pockets, his face ashen. He wouldn't look at me. Don't hello me, Danielle snapped. What the hell have you done? I think you mean, what have I undone, I said evenly. Would you like to sit down? I don't want to sit down. Her voice rose sharply. Several residents shifted uncomfortably. I want you to explain why my accounts are frozen, why my credit cards don't work, why your lawyer is telling me I have no access to anything. Because you abused your power of attorney, I said simply. So I revoked it. Abused? Danielle's laugh was shrill, brittle. I was helping you. Managing your affairs because you were clearly becoming incapable of. Of what? I interrupted, my voice still calm but hardening at the edges. Incapable of refusing to let you sell my home? Incapable of not noticing you'd listed it for sale before I'd even been here 24 hours? Danielle's mouth opened, then closed. For a moment, she looked like she might deny it. Then her expression shifted, from defensive to aggressive. That house was an asset, Mom. A massive asset just sitting there while you lived alone in 4 bedrooms you didn't need. I was being practical. You were being opportunistic. I was thinking about the family. Danielle's voice cracked. Do you have any idea what our financial situation is? Troy's business failed. We're drowning in debt. The kids' school tuition alone is $40,000 a year. We needed that money. Then you should have asked me for help, I said quietly. Instead of stealing it. Stealing? Danielle's face flushed deep red. How dare you? I'm your daughter. Everything you have is supposed to go to me eventually anyway. I was just accelerating the timeline. I finished, throwing her own words back at her. Yes, you said that on the phone. You made it very clear that you saw me as an inconvenient obstacle standing between you and an inheritance. That's not, Danielle's voice wavered. You're twisting everything. Am I? I stood up slowly, meeting her at eye level. Around us, the room had gone completely silent. You called me incompetent. You moved me into a nursing home against my will. You sold my house without my knowledge or consent. You used legal documents meant to protect me to instead exploit me. Which part am I twisting, Danielle? She stared at me, and for just a moment, I saw something flicker in her eyes, shame, maybe, or recognition. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by something uglier. Entitlement. I owe you, she hissed, leaning closer. Mom, after everything I've done for you? After I took care of you when Dad died? After I helped you with bills and paperwork and made sure you were okay? You owe me. You're my mother, you're supposed to help me when I need it. The words hung in the air like poison gas. I looked at my daughter, this woman I'd carried for 9 months, nursed through midnight fevers, cheered at every dance recital and graduation, loved with every fiber of my being, and I barely recognized her. No, Danielle, I said softly. I owe you nothing but honesty. Nothing? Her voice rose to a near shriek. I'm your daughter. Your only child. Everything you have should be mine. Why? The question came out sharper than I intended. Because you were born? Because I raised you? Being a mother doesn't mean I'm a resource for you to extract. It doesn't mean my entire existence should be in service to your financial problems. That's not what That's exactly what you meant. I took a breath, steadying myself. You didn't call to check on me because you cared about my well-being. You called to make sure the asset, me, was properly warehoused so you could liquidate what I owned. Danielle's face contorted with fury and something else, desperation. You have no idea what it's like. You and Dad lived your safe little life in your paid-off house with your small dreams. We have real financial pressures. Real expectations. We're trying to give our children opportunities you never gave me. The accusation stung, but I didn't let it show. I gave you everything I had, I said quietly. But apparently, that was never going to be enough. Troy finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Joanne, please. We're bankrupt. I turned to him. Excuse me? He couldn't meet my eyes. We mortgaged your house. Used the power of attorney to take out a reverse mortgage 6 months ago. We thought we could pay it back before you noticed, but the business losses were worse than we expected. Now the bank is threatening foreclosure, and without access to your accounts. The room spun slightly. You mortgaged my house? I kept my voice level through sheer force of will. My home? The one William and I built together? We were desperate, Troy mumbled. So you committed fraud. I looked between them. You used my identity, my property, to secure a loan you had no intention or ability to repay. That's not just unethical. It's criminal. It was going to be mine anyway. Danielle exploded. Why does it matter if I accessed it a few years early? Because it wasn't yours yet, I said, my voice like steel. Because I was still alive. Still living in that house. Still believing my daughter loved me more than she loved my assets. Danielle's expression crumpled, but not with remorse. With rage. Love, she spat. You want to talk about love? You kept secrets from me, Mom. You hid that inheritance from Uncle Harold. $9 million and you didn't say a word. What kind of mother does that? Ah. There it was. The kind who knows her daughter well enough to predict exactly this reaction, I said calmly. I received that letter 2 weeks before my birthday. 2 weeks, Danielle. And in that time, you called me incompetent, warehoused me, and tried to sell my home. Imagine what you would have done if you'd known about the money from the beginning. I would have. You would have found a way to take it, I finished. Just like you took everything else. Danielle's chest heaved. So what now? You're just going to cut me off completely? Destroy your own daughter over money? No, I said softly. You destroyed our relationship all by yourself. I'm simply choosing to save myself from the wreckage. What does that mean? I walked to the small table where I'd left my folder and pulled out a document. This is the charter for the Harold Thompson Memorial Fund. A foundation I'm establishing in my brother's name to provide legal assistance and housing support for elderly people who've been financially exploited by their own families. I watched the color drain from Danielle's face. You wanted my house, I continued, my voice steady and clear. Instead, I'm using Harold's inheritance to help hundreds of mothers and fathers who've lost theirs. People whose children saw them as assets instead of parents. People who deserve advocates. You can't. I already have. The lawyers filed the paperwork yesterday. The foundation launches next month with an initial endowment of $7 million. Danielle staggered backward like I'd physically struck her. $7 million? You're giving away $7 million to strangers instead of helping your own family? My family put me in a nursing home and sold my house, I said quietly. Those strangers are more family to me now than you've been in months. This is insane. Danielle looked around wildly, as if searching for someone to validate her outrage. You're losing your mind. This proves you need help. Troy, call. No. Troy's voice was firm. For the first time since they'd arrived, he looked directly at me. She's right, Danny. We went too far. Danielle whirled on him. Don't you dare take her side. I'm not taking sides, he said tiredly. I'm done. This whole thing was a mistake from the beginning. A mistake? Danielle's voice climbed into hysteria. We're bankrupt, Troy. We're going to lose the house, the cars, everything. And she's sitting on millions giving it away to people she doesn't even know. It's her money, Troy said simply. Not ours. Danielle turned back to me, tears now streaming down her face. But they weren't tears of remorse or sadness. They were tears of frustrated rage. You're my mother, she said, her voice breaking. You're supposed to love me unconditionally. You're supposed to help me. That's what mothers do. The words pierced something deep inside me. Because she was right, in a way. I had loved her unconditionally. I still did. But love didn't mean being a doormat. Love didn't mean allowing myself to be exploited, diminished, erased. Danielle, I said gently, I will always be your mother. But you stopped being my daughter the moment you decided I was worth more dead than alive. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. You left me for dead, I continued, my voice soft but unwavering. You buried me in this place, wrapped in your guilt and your justifications. You thought I'd simply fade away, convenient and quiet, while you liquidated what was left of my life. I stepped closer, looking into eyes that had once been filled with childish wonder and unconditional love. But mothers like me don't rot in silence, Danielle. We rise. The silence that followed was absolute. Around us, the other residents sat frozen, witnesses to a family's complete disintegration. Danielle's face cycled through a dozen expressions: fury, humiliation, desperation, fear. Finally, she settled on cold contempt. Fine, she said, her voice flat. Keep your money. Start your precious foundation. But don't expect me to ever speak to you again. I don't, I said quietly. She turned and walked toward the door, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. Troy hesitated, looking at me with something that might have been an apology in his eyes. I'm sorry, Joanne, he said quietly. For all of it. Then he followed Danielle out. I stood in the middle of the common room, watching them disappear through the double doors, listening to the echo of their footsteps fade down the hallway. My hands were steady. My breathing was calm. And when Martha appeared at my elbow a moment later, asking if I was okay, I realized something surprising. I wasn't crying. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt no tears, no grief, no desperate wish to rewind time and fix what was broken. I felt only resolved. I'm okay, I told Martha, and meant it completely. Because somewhere between that terrible birthday phone call and this moment, I had stopped being Danielle's mother and started being Joanne again. And Joanne, I was discovering, was someone worth fighting for. The cottage smelled like pine and possibility. I stood in the doorway on my first morning as owner, watching dawn break over Mirror Lake. The water caught the light like scattered diamonds, and somewhere in the distance, a loon called out its lonely, beautiful song. This was mine. The thought still felt foreign, like a coat that didn't quite fit yet. For 65 years, I'd lived in spaces defined by other people, my parents' home, the house William and I shared, that beige room at St. Mary's. Even my identity had been shaped by others, daughter, wife, mother. But here, in this small white cottage with its blue shutters and creaking floorboards, I was simply Joanne. I wasn't sure yet who that was. The moving truck had delivered my belongings yesterday, not much, really. Most of what I owned had been in William's house, and I'd left it there. Let the bank deal with Danielle's reverse mortgage fraud. Let them sort through the wreckage of her greed. I had taken only what was mine, my clothes, my mother's china, the photo albums I'd carefully curated over decades, and a few pieces of furniture William had built himself. The rest, the couches Danielle had picked out, the curtains she'd insisted matched the walls, the decorative pillows that shouted, live, laugh, love, in cursive, I'd left behind. Those had never been mine anyway. I walked through the cottage slowly, running my fingers along the windowsills, learning the geography of my new life. 2 bedrooms, though I only needed one. A kitchen with windows overlooking the lake. A small sitting room with a fireplace I'd probably never use. A bathroom with an old clawfoot tub that creaked when I tested the water. It was quiet here. Not the oppressive silence of St. Mary's, filled with institutional sounds and the weight of other people's loneliness. This was a different kind of quiet, peaceful, expectant, like the pause between musical notes. I made coffee in the small kitchen and carried it onto the back porch. The dock extended into the water, and I could imagine sitting there in summer, feet dangling, watching the world reflected in the lake's mirror surface. Freedom felt strange. It felt like relief and guilt braided together, impossible to separate. I was free, but at what cost? I had my independence, my agency, my self-respect. I had lost my daughter. The thought brought tears, which I allowed to fall quietly into my coffee. Grief was allowed here. In this space I'd carved out for myself, I didn't have to be strong or stoic or anything but honest. I missed Danielle. Not the woman who'd stormed into St. Mary's demanding access to money that wasn't hers. Not the daughter who'd seen me as an inconvenient obstacle. I missed the little girl who'd brought me dandelions and called them roses. The teenager who'd cried on my shoulder after her first heartbreak. The young woman who'd asked me to help her pick out her wedding dress. Somewhere along the way, that girl had disappeared, replaced by someone I barely recognized. Or maybe I'd simply been too willing to see only what I wanted to see. I sat on the porch until the coffee grew cold, watching the morning light transform the lake from darkness to gold. 2 weeks later, Mr. Bennett and I sat in his office in Denver, finalizing the paperwork for the Harold Thompson Memorial Fund. The initial endowment is $7 million, he explained, sliding documents across his mahogany desk. With proper management and investment, we can sustain indefinite operations while still providing substantial grants annually. I signed my name on the dotted lines, each signature feeling like a small act of rebellion against the woman I used to be, the one who would have given that money to Danielle without question, enabling her dependence while calling it love. I've already vetted the first applicant, Mr. Bennett continued, pulling up a file on his computer. Robert Martinez, 73, from Colorado Springs. His son used a power of attorney to sell his home and drain his savings. Mr. Martinez is currently living in his car. My chest tightened. His car? He has dementia, early stage, still functional most days, but his son used that diagnosis to declare him incompetent. By the time Mr. Martinez realized what had happened, everything was gone. I thought of that terrible moment when I'd overheard the nurses discussing my own house being listed for sale. The betrayal, the helplessness, the feeling of being erased. How much does he need? I asked quietly. Rent assistance for the first 6 months while we help him find permanent housing. About $10,000. We'll also provide legal aid to potentially recover some of his assets. Approve it, I said. Today. Mr. Bennett smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. As we finalized the details, I felt something shift inside me. This pain, this betrayal, it could poison me, turn me bitter and closed. Or I could transform it into something that helped others. Harold had given me a gift. Not just money, but the opportunity to choose who I wanted to be in the aftermath of devastation. I chose to be someone who helped other mothers and fathers rise. The letter arrived on a Thursday, 3 weeks after I'd moved into the cottage. I recognized Danielle's handwriting immediately, the careful loops and precise slant she'd perfected in Catholic school. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. Dear Mom. I don't know if you'll read this. I wouldn't blame you if you threw it away without opening it. But I need to try. I've spent the last month thinking about what I said to you. What I did to you. And I don't have any excuses that matter. I was desperate, yes. We were drowning financially, yes. But that doesn't justify any of it. You were right. About all of it. I saw you as an asset. I convinced myself I was being practical, making hard decisions, doing what needed to be done. But the truth is, I stopped seeing you as my mother somewhere along the way. You became a problem to solve, a resource to manage. I'm so ashamed I can barely write these words. The bank foreclosed on our house. Troy lost the business completely. We're living in a small apartment now, 2 bedrooms, nothing like before. I got a job cleaning rooms at the Hampton Inn. It's humbling, exhausting work, but it's honest. Troy got work at a warehouse. The kids had to leave private school. Emma cried for 3 days. We lost everything, Mom. Everything I was so desperate to protect. And the worst part, the part that keeps me awake at night, is that I lost it because I was willing to sacrifice you to save it. I chose money over you. Status over integrity. Comfort over love. I don't expect you to forgive me. I'm not even sure I deserve the chance to ask. But I want you to know that I understand now. I understand what I did, what I destroyed, who I became. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The foundation you created, the Herald Fund, I read about it online. You're helping people like Mr. Martinez, people whose families betrayed them the way I betrayed you. And I'm proud of you, Mom. Even though I have no right to be. Even though I'm one of the villains in the story you're trying to correct. I just miss you. I miss calling you when the kids do something funny. I miss your voice telling me it'll be okay. I miss having a mother. I know I threw that away. This was mine. The thought still felt foreign, like a coat that didn't quite fit yet. For 65 years, I'd lived in spaces defined by other people, my parents' home, the house William and I shared, that beige room at St. Mary's. Even my identity had been shaped by others, daughter, wife, mother. But here, in this small white cottage with its blue shutters and creaking floorboards, I was simply Joanne. I wasn't sure yet who that was. The moving truck had delivered my belongings yesterday, not much, really. Most of what I owned had been in William's house, and I'd left it there. Let the bank deal with Danielle's reverse mortgage fraud. Let them sort through the wreckage of her greed. I had taken only what was mine, my clothes, my mother's china, the photo albums I'd carefully curated over decades, and a few pieces of furniture William had built himself. The rest, the couches Danielle had picked out, the curtains she'd insisted matched the walls, the decorative pillows that shouted, live, laugh, love, in cursive, I'd left behind. Those had never been mine anyway. I walked through the cottage slowly, running my fingers along the windowsills, learning the geography of my new life. 2 bedrooms, though I only needed one. A kitchen with windows overlooking the lake. A small sitting room with a fireplace I'd probably never use. A bathroom with an old clawfoot tub that creaked when I tested the water. It was quiet here. Not the oppressive silence of St. Mary's, filled with institutional sounds and the weight of other people's loneliness. This was a different kind of quiet, peaceful, expectant, like the pause between musical notes. I made coffee in the small kitchen and carried it onto the back porch. The dock extended into the water, and I could imagine sitting there in summer, feet dangling, watching the world reflected in the lake's mirror surface. Freedom felt strange. It felt like relief and guilt braided together, impossible to separate. I was free, but at what cost? I had my independence, my agency, my self-respect. I had lost my daughter. The thought brought tears, which I allowed to fall quietly into my coffee. Grief was allowed here. In this space I'd carved out for myself, I didn't have to be strong or stoic or anything but honest. I missed Danielle. Not the woman who'd stormed into St. Mary's demanding access to money that wasn't hers. Not the daughter who'd seen me as an inconvenient obstacle. I missed the little girl who'd brought me dandelions and called them roses. The teenager who'd cried on my shoulder after her first heartbreak. The young woman who'd asked me to help her pick out her wedding dress. Somewhere along the way, that girl had disappeared, replaced by someone I barely recognized. Or maybe I'd simply been too willing to see only what I wanted to see. I sat on the porch until the coffee grew cold, watching the morning light transform the lake from darkness to gold. 2 weeks later, Mr. Bennett and I sat in his office in Denver, finalizing the paperwork for the Harold Thompson Memorial Fund. The initial endowment is $7 million, he explained, sliding documents across his mahogany desk. With proper management and investment, we can sustain indefinite operations while still providing substantial grants annually. I signed my name on the dotted lines, each signature feeling like a small act of rebellion against the woman I used to be, the one who would have given that money to Danielle without question, enabling her dependence while calling it love. I've already vetted the first applicant, Mr. Bennett continued, pulling up a file on his computer. Robert Martinez, 73, from Colorado Springs. His son used a power of attorney to sell his home and drain his savings. Mr. Martinez is currently living in his car. My chest tightened. His car? He has dementia, early stage, still functional most days, but his son used that diagnosis to declare him incompetent. By the time Mr. Martinez realized what had happened, everything was gone. I thought of that terrible moment when I'd overheard the nurses discussing my own house being listed for sale. The betrayal, the helplessness, the feeling of being erased. How much does he need? I asked quietly. Rent assistance for the first 6 months while we help him find permanent housing. About $10,000. We'll also provide legal aid to potentially recover some of his assets. Approve it, I said. Today. Mr. Bennett smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. As we finalized the details, I felt something shift inside me. This pain, this betrayal, it could poison me, turn me bitter and closed. Or I could transform it into something that helped others. Harold had given me a gift. Not just money, but the opportunity to choose who I wanted to be in the aftermath of devastation. I chose to be someone who helped other mothers and fathers rise. The letter arrived on a Thursday, 3 weeks after I'd moved into the cottage. I recognized Danielle's handwriting immediately, the careful loops and precise slant she'd perfected in Catholic school. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. Dear Mom. I don't know if you'll read this. I wouldn't blame you if you threw it away without opening it. But I need to try. I've spent the last month thinking about what I said to you. What I did to you. And I don't have any excuses that matter. I was desperate, yes. We were drowning financially, yes. But that doesn't justify any of it. You were right. About all of it. I saw you as an asset. I convinced myself I was being practical, making hard decisions, doing what needed to be done. But the truth is, I stopped seeing you as my mother somewhere along the way. You became a problem to solve, a resource to manage. I'm so ashamed I can barely write these words. The bank foreclosed on our house. Troy lost the business completely. We're living in a small apartment now, 2 bedrooms, nothing like before. I got a job cleaning rooms at the Hampton Inn. It's humbling, exhausting work, but it's honest. Troy got work at a warehouse. The kids had to leave private school. Emma cried for 3 days. We lost everything, Mom. Everything I was so desperate to protect. And the worst part, the part that keeps me awake at night, is that I lost it because I was willing to sacrifice you to save it. I chose money over you. Status over integrity. Comfort over love. I don't expect you to forgive me. I'm not even sure I deserve the chance to ask. But I want you to know that I understand now. I understand what I did, what I destroyed, who I became. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The foundation you created, the Herald Fund, I read about it online. You're helping people like Mr. Martinez, people whose families betrayed them the way I betrayed you. And I'm proud of you, Mom. Even though I have no right to be. Even though I'm one of the villains in the story you're trying to correct. I just miss you. I miss calling you when the kids do something funny. I miss your voice telling me it'll be okay. I miss having a mother. I know I threw that away. But if there's ever a time when you're willing to talk, even just once, I'd like to try to be the daughter you deserved all along. I love you. I never stopped, even when I acted like I did. Danielle. I read the letter 3 times, sitting at my kitchen table while my tea grew cold and the afternoon light stretched long across the floor. Tears came, not the sharp, bitter tears of betrayal, but something softer. Sadder. Because I believed her. I believed she was sorry. I believed she'd learned something painful and necessary through loss. I believed she was genuinely trying to become someone better. But belief wasn't the same as trust. And forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. I took the letter to bed with me that night, reading it once more before turning off the light. Then I knelt beside my bed, something I hadn't done since William died, and prayed. Not for guidance or wisdom or any of the things pastors suggest. I prayed for clarity. God, I whispered into the darkness, help me know the difference between forgiveness and foolishness. Help me stop bleeding from this wound without pretending it never happened. I prayed for Danielle, too. For her humility to be genuine. For her transformation to take root. And I prayed for myself, for the strength to set boundaries, to protect the person I was becoming, even if it meant holding my daughter at arm's length. When I climbed back into bed, I felt no immediate answers. But I felt something close to peace. Troy appeared at my door 3 days later. I almost didn't answer when I saw him through the window, standing on my small porch, hands shoved deep in his pockets, looking nervous and smaller than I remembered. But curiosity won out. "Joanne," he said when I opened the door. "I'm sorry to show up unannounced. I know I have no right." "What do you want, Troy?" He flinched at my directness. "Just 5 minutes. Please. Danielle doesn't know I'm here." I considered sending him away. But something in his expression, genuine remorse, maybe, or exhaustion, made me step back and gesture him inside. He stood awkwardly in my small living room, looking at everything except me. "Nice place," he finally said. "Peaceful." "It is." I didn't offer him a seat. "You said 5 minutes." He nodded, swallowing hard. "Danielle's pregnant." The words hit me like cold water. "What?" "Found out last week." "Early, just 6 weeks." "But it's real." His hands were shaking. "It wasn't planned. With everything that's happened, the stress, the money problems, we weren't trying. But it happened anyway." I sank into my chair, my mind reeling. Another grandchild. A baby. "She doesn't want me to tell you," Troy continued quietly. "She's terrified you'll think it's manipulation. Another attempt to get your sympathy or your money. But I thought you should know because," his voice cracked. "Because she needs you, Joanne. More than she's willing to admit. More than I can help her with. Troy. She's already chosen a name." He looked at me finally, his eyes wet. "If it's a girl. She wants to name her Lily." My breath caught. Lilies were my favorite flowers. Had been since childhood, when my mother had grown them in our backyard. I'd carried white lilies at my wedding. I'd planted them at William's grave. Danielle knew this. "Lily," Troy repeated softly. "After your favorite flowers." She said she wants to raise this baby differently. Teach her about sacrifice and love and putting people before possessions. And she wants to name her after the woman who tried to teach her those things all along. Tears blurred my vision. "Troy, I can't. I'm not asking you to forgive everything," he said quickly. "I'm not asking you to forget or to hand over money or to fix our problems. I'm just telling you because you deserve to know that something's changing in her. Something real." He moved toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry too. For all of it. You deserved better from both of us." Then he was gone, leaving me alone in my quiet cottage with news that felt like hope and fear tangled together. That night, I went out to the small garden I'd started beside the cottage. I'd planted lilies there the week after moving in, tiger lilies, white Madonna lilies, pink stargazers. They were still small, just beginning to establish their roots in the rocky soil. I knelt in the dirt under moonlight, my hands working the soil around the fragile plants, and I thought about names and second chances and the complicated nature of love. Lily. My granddaughter would be named Lily. The thought brought simultaneous joy and terror. Because what if this was manipulation? What if Danielle was using her pregnancy, her apparent transformation, to work her way back into my life, and my bank account. But what if it wasn't? What if this baby, this unexpected new life, was genuinely changing her? I couldn't know. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time. But I could tend these lilies. I could water them and watch them grow. I could give them what they needed without sacrificing my own foundation. And maybe, eventually, I could do the same for Danielle. Not because she deserved it. But because some part of me, the part that was still her mother, despite everything, wanted to believe in redemption. The moon hung low over the lake, painting everything silver. My hands were dirty with soil, my knees damp from kneeling. And in that quiet moment, I felt something take root inside me. Not forgiveness, exactly. Not yet. But hope. Fragile, tentative hope that maybe, just maybe, broken things could heal if given enough time and careful tending. The lilies would bloom in spring. Until then, I would wait and watch and protect the peace I'd fought so hard to claim. Spring came early to Pine Hollow that year. The lilies I'd planted bloomed in late April, their vibrant petals opening like small prayers answered. I was kneeling in my garden, hands deep in the soil, when I heard the car. Not many vehicles came down my gravel road. The cottage sat at the end of a private lane, deliberately isolated. So when I heard tires crunching over stones, I stood up, wiping my hands on my gardening apron. The car was unfamiliar, a modest sedan, several years old, with a dent in the rear bumper. Not the luxury SUV Danielle used to drive. The engine cut off. The driver's door opened. And Danielle stepped out. She looked different. Thinner, her face bare of the usual makeup, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore jeans and a plain sweater, nothing designer, nothing expensive. But it was her eyes that caught me most. They looked older. Humbler. Scared. She moved around to the passenger side and carefully opened the back door. When she straightened, she was holding a bundle wrapped in a soft yellow blanket. My heart stopped. "Mom," Danielle said quietly, walking toward me slowly, like approaching a wild animal that might bolt. "This is your granddaughter." She stopped a few feet away and adjusted the blanket so I could see. A tiny face, round and pink and perfect. Eyes squeezed shut against the spring sunshine. A small fist curled against her cheek.